Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. This is the fourth installment of the Solomon Moore podcast. Did I get that right? Is this the fourth one?
I think it's number 4, yeah. And we're obviously a couple of days late on this one. Last week was hectic, and we're getting back into the swing of things. And obviously there's been just a ridiculous amount of news coming out over the past week, geopolitical tensions, not even just tensions, but war, obviously. There's been a ton of information, but it's number 4, Darren. Yep. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here too. So the first piece of information is this is Todd McDonald from R3, and this is they have a podcast, Life in the Fast Chain. So listen to what Todd has to say.
Great. All the industry's hard at work on trying to figure out how they can bring regulated digital currency to market. Yeah, there's lots of different ways to do it. We're working directly with central banks on their digital currency projects. Bank, others, in Kazakhstan and some other places, and that's going to continue. But there's a growing sentiment where what is the near term? What's possible in the more than near term? So the next 12 to 18 months.
Oh.
So is it? One thing I like to say is even if central banks are on an accelerated timeline, they're still on a central bank timeline.
Yeah.
And it totally makes sense because they have to definitely, measure twice and cut once, that expression. So they have to make sure that they're very purposeful in how they move forward. There's so many second, third order risks to all this stuff. So are there ways to bring the other side of this trade to market? So there are lots of digital asset networks coming online that we're involved in, others are involved in. So how do we help bring regulated settlement to those networks? How can we potentially bring something that's maybe close to what central bank digital currency will be, but something that can be live in the next sort of quarters as opposed to years? So that's I find that that was part of what the business trip. It's great to see people again.
Yeah,
nice to be.
Yeah, so I just realized this. He said for the public blockchains, quarters instead of years. So at first he says 12 to 18 months, but now he's saying quarters to and versus years. So that means that the timeline's really accelerated. And my thoughts on this whole thing, right, is there has to be some type of use case that the central banks actually want to do, right? So I don't think they're just issuing CBDCs for the sake of issuing CBDCs, right? There's all these crypto networks that are able to create innovative platforms. If you have central bank digital currencies on that platform, then whatever projects that we've been researching can now use that central bank money. So I think there's a reason for them wanting to issue on public blockchains. What's your thoughts on this, Solomon?
I just think it's interesting that we consistently kind of I know with R3, he had mentioned Riksbank. And we've seen a good amount with them. We do know that the eCrona technology innovation partner with Riksbank, along with R3, obviously, now that we know that, was Accenture. And Accenture, not to allude it directly to Ripple, who knows if there's going to be a relationship there, but Accenture does RippleNet integrations. We know that Accenture obviously was chosen as the technology partner for updating the Bank of England's renewed real-time gross settlement system, which is not going to be built on top of distributed ledger, but is going to be able to interoperate with it. That's directly from Victoria Cleland. I think she is one of the head payments managers at the Bank of England. And it's interesting to me that we just see a lot of the same names and a lot of the same players. We can even go back to the Central Bank of France, alluding to the fact that the Ripple platform and XRP, the asset, have been in discussions to potentially be utilized as the European Union's central bank digital currency across the board. And even extrapolating upon that a little bit more, there's that document that came out from, I think it was the World Economic Forum, talking about wholesale CBDCs and the issuance of those CBDCs could interoperate or interface with a native digital asset, and they give Ethereum and RippleNet or Ripple as examples. Obviously, it's the XRPL, but you get the gist of what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. There's all these different central bank projects, right? Like SDX has one with atomic swaps with securities and everything. So what does that look like if central bank digital currencies are on public ledgers and those platforms come alive, like, like what does that actually look like? I mean, I would assume that the liquidity for those public chains would become more and more, right? Just having sovereign currency on the digital asset itself. I think that's really going to be a catalyst for these networks to grow. And then the confidence that developers have, if they know that their central bank money on, Hedera or XRP or Ethereum or whatever, that will drive the developers to those platforms to build more and more. Because it's, ultimately money is just confidence. And that would be a great way to attract developers as well as users, and not to mention just the utility aspect of that, right? Like all the XRP that's burnt, all the HBAR that's burnt. That I'm excited to see where this is all headed. I don't exactly know where it's headed, but I could see the signs pointing ahead, and it's kind of interesting where it's all headed.
Yeah, it's crazy too, because like we know there's initiatives going on across the board. Even looking at that Project New Dawn, which is MTech and Hedera Hashgraph, Microsoft, and I can't remember which branch of the Federal Reserve, as far as Boston or New York or where it's at, but one of the Federal Reserve. I'm calling it a branch, but I think it's Boston, or maybe it is New York. But we see these announcements come out, and then I will consistently try to do like sweeps and searches, to try to find out if there's any more information after the fact. But it's like some of these announcements occur and then everything just kind of goes dark. And it's like, well, they're certainly not building. They made these announcements. I'm curious to see how everything pans out as well. I mean, there's a lot of talk right now as far as Russia potentially utilizing digital assets and crypto to circumvent sanctions. And I know that we're being told that's not going to be the case within certain networks, and that's fine. But I can also look at some of the things Russia's been doing, as far as their first blockchain platform that has been regulated is a company called Atomize, and they're directly tokenizing. I mean, they didn't even mention it in the article, but you go to their website. We talked about this a few weeks ago. I mean, it's all precious metals. And their parliament, about a month ago, I caught an article that was saying that, that could potentially be a use case that's coming directly out of Russia to circumvent sanctions. If sanctions were put in place, would be to utilize the tokenized gold, tokenized whatever, potentially.
Yeah, I've seen Garlinghouse and Ashish address this topic, which from like a PR standpoint, I understand that, they need to kind of get in front of everything and kind of tell everyone that, this isn't used to evade sanctions. And they're right for the most part, right? Like you're not going to be able to circumvent anything going through dollars or euros, right? You bring it back to an exchange. Those endpoints are strictly regulated. But what I think people are failing to understand is these ledgers are accounting mechanisms, and Russia's not going to just wither away, right? They're going to figure out some type of way to trade with other countries that are willing to trade with them. And I mean, all this technology is used for something like this, right? Trustless ledgers to account for what the country has, right? So if Russia has a stockpile of oil, gold, all the natural resources, they can tokenize that. And as long as they make good on those tokens, right, then they can use ledgers. So they just can't bring it back into the dollar euro system. But I mean, they've been preparing for this for a while. If you look at their actions, right, they raised interest rates to an absurd level during the whole drop in 2020. And then on top of it, they've been stockpiling gold, setting up these bilateral relationships. And I mean, they're not going to just, not do anything about it. They're going to try to figure out a way to do that, as well as we had SIPS and SPFS, which is kind of the SWIFT. So SIPS is the SWIFT of China, while SPFS, I believe that's the right abbreviation, but they're the SWIFT of Russia. And what's going on there, right, is like this dominant network, SWIFT, has cut them off. So they've have their own
I think certain banks, right? So Is it just the banks that were announced, VTB, and there was a handful of others? But yeah, no, I mean, we're consistent. And I think I even saw a day or two ago, Visa and MasterCard removing services. So.
Yeah, well, the sanctions have been a little peculiar, right? They've allowed energy. They've sanctioned certain banks, right? They haven't sanctioned everything, but I think that's all picking up. I think eventually we'll get there, except for the energy. I don't think energy is going to be sanctioned, but and
there's a story to be told here with these things as well, where it's not even, I mean, there's documents that have come out that and these are organizational documents and these initiatives as far as like Soramitsu, the National Securities Depository of Russia, and that tie-in that I think I had done a video on that a year or two ago, essentially tying in, Ripple network nodes, Ethereum network nodes, and this initiative is called D3, the D3 Ledger, D3 network, and that it's tying in, the Securities Depository of Russia, Russia's regulated financial market, all into this ecosystem. And then even to delve out further with Central Bank of Russia, certainly looking at Ripple, certainly looking at XRP in 2018, at least. I mean, we know that it's just fact. I mean, I can't argue things that I'm seeing in black and white. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to be utilized, but it's just interesting. I think all we can do is try to put the breadcrumbs together as much as we possibly can, and not allude to things, but at least things that we're finding and we're seeing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because they set up these integrations doesn't mean that they actually use a specific one that they talked about or they integrated with. But what I see is the system becomes more and more fragmented, right? So SIPs, the SPFS, those networks have more traction. After they get cut off of one network, those users move to those networks. And ultimately, I see some type of peace working out with all this, but that doesn't change the network post all this, where there's more users on those networks. And now, payments need to go from the SIPS network to the SWIFT network to the SPFS network. And that's where ISO 222 messaging comes into play. That's where, all these interoperability standards are going to come into play. So it's more of like a long-term thing. And I mean, Ripple is the American company. So these integrations, it doesn't make sense for them to trust an American company. I think the integrations are set up for long down the road, right? But this is a catalyst to speed all of that up. And ultimately, when we see some type of peace, when we see some type of diplomacy, that's where RippleNet bridges network to network type of thing, or ISO messaging standards bridge all this together. But,
I mean, he even alluded to the measure in that video, measure twice and cut once. I mean, that's what we have seen so many different integrations. Accenture is only one of a handful of kind of the big players that are doing these integrations. And that's why we consistently see, Rails being kind of continuously being built out amongst different members. Interoperability is going to be the key to absolutely everything. Obviously, that's why, I'm a believer in things like Quant and what they're going to be doing with Overledger, and obviously interledger protocol, more of an agnostic value transfer mechanism. And, all of these things play a role. It's going to be really interesting to see how they shake out, because you can look at initiatives like R3 and you can look at initiatives like Hyperledger, and there always seems to be carryover as far as either individuals or companies or institutions that all of these things are being built out upon. Almost like they're building a new system, right? Right. We certainly are.
Yeah. I saw a video with Oracle and Quant. Do you know about that partnership and everything that's happening between Overledger?
Not everything. You could probably expand upon it, but I certainly know. And I'm remembering the integration for sure.
Yeah, well, the Quant Gilbert, I forget his last name, but he was saying, he was saying that they have access to all of Oracle's users. So that partnership just gives them access to all those users. I mean, like Oracle is vast, right? They're a very large company. So any users that need to use the Overledger network can go through, Oracle to use it.
Yeah, and there's documents that we've seen. I can't even remember which document this is, and this was years ago. This was probably 2017 or 2018. God, I wish I could remember what it's from, but essentially saying that, like, Ripple and the ecosystem of Ripple is like it's not even like 3 or 4 steps removed. It's like one step from pretty much reaching out and touching almost everything in the global banking industry. I'll have to try to track that document down at some point, but it's amazing that it's all of these integrations are certainly built out. Even look at DTCC, right? Project Ion, they have literally said that they're building a system to operate in parallel with the traditional system. So once you have all of everything built out, and you have that parallel system built, the natural progression of that is you start trying to take away pain points in the legacy system that you can utilize DLT and maybe digital assets within that makes sense right off the bat, but you start to have that carryover and that merging. And then once you start doing that, obviously there's no going back. I think you and I both agree that at some point we see distributed ledger digital assets kind of swallowing the majority of the traditional financial world. So.
Yeah, I mean, legacy is going to have some purposes, right? And especially like right off the bat, legacy is going to have more of a dominant role. But I'm a capitalist. I believe that efficiencies, cost savings are eventually going to, be the reason why everyone switches over. People are motivated by greed. Big companies are motivated by greed. If there's a surplus in their balance sheet because of technologies, like why wouldn't they do that? That makes absolutely no sense. That just because it's related to crypto, they wouldn't get involved with it. If they could save a bunch of money, they could save a bunch of money.
Yeah, I think even it's interesting to me because I don't share the mindset that Swift is just going to completely die. Just because I believe that there's so much money built up in Swift, and that's old money. But I do think what's happening, and this is based on even the news that they've been presenting over the rhetoric that is consistently shifting over time, where even in December, Swift essentially exploring the utilization of digital assets. Well, no shit, that's just where this market goes. The one thing that will be interesting though is, Swift right now is they have their cake and they're eating it too. I think at some point, maybe they have portions of their cake, but there's going to be a lot of people sitting at the table ready to eat. And it's interesting, some of the networks that we're talking about, some of the digital assets that could facilitate things within these networks. And I think that starts to take away market share from the legacy institutions as everything flushes out. It's really an adapt or die type thing, or integrate or die. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, and that's not even assuming things. I mean, they're telling you what they're doing. And it's just the rhetoric is going to consistently shift and shift and shift. And then everything's pretty much going to be live, right? It's just time.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And we're seeing the writing on the wall, right? But my point with that transition, though, is like if it's brand new, I think, some of the older institutions will continue to use Swift for like very large value payments, everything like that. But I mean, also this levels the playing field for the fintechs, for the smaller banks, for the medium-sized banks to all compete with the incumbents too. So I mean, there's a lot of push from that side as well. There's profits to be made that the incumbents are hogging up right now. And I'm not convinced that, the incumbents even want this monopoly anymore. Like they certainly want it in certain areas, right? And I think that's where the large value payments are going to come in, US dollars or euro. But these smaller corridors, right? They're getting fined constantly. They're taking the reputational risk of even getting fined. I mean, that hurts their stock prices when it's in the news that Bank of America was somehow tied to money laundering, right? It's a bad look on them, and they have to pay all that. It's all risk, right? So if you're in these corridors that have frequent fines, you're better off just cutting the ties there. Now, if the smaller guys are able to do that, and are able to do that fast and cost effective, I think that's going to be major traction.
Yeah,
So,
what we've seen too is that, like, I mean, just it's interesting. Like, I still know, I try to think that I know a lot about, or a little bit about a lot of different things. So I'm certainly not an expert as far as banking or anything, but from everything I've seen over the past few years, I mean, the tier one banks historically have kind of run the gambit as far as anything that is occurring, cascading down all the way into credit unions and things like that, and leveling the playing field and empowering all of these smaller institutions. I mean, it's really starting to, I don't want to say the tables are turning, but there's a little bit of a leveling going on, which is certainly interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like the U.S. economy is like based off of small businesses too. The most taxes, the most everything's paid by small businesses. So it's really a disservice to favor incumbents versus the smaller institutions as well. So this is a MoneyGram article that talks about their fourth quarter and 2021 results, and they say that the absence of 8.5 million Ripple net benefit generated in the fourth of 2020. So MoneyGram lost 8.5 million just by having to get rid of their Ripple net partnership. And that the libertarian in me is like that they were saving 8.5 million that can be passed on to consumers. So they're really cutting the cost of remittance costs for everyone. But instead, the government got involved and caused this partnership to erode. They've lost out on 8.5 million plus all the legal fees, everything that's involved with it. It seems like, it's just going the opposite. These shorter term things are just, putting obstacles that are costing everyone. What are your thoughts about?
I just think it's interesting because, I mean, we see, I don't want to call it similar, but, Ripple essentially acquiring whatever it was, a 30 or 40% stake into Trianglo, right? And now ODL, which obviously can utilize XRP essentially across, what is it, 25 corridors now? And that you kind of see that tie-in that Trianglo has with WeChat, Alipay, things like that. So the innovation isn't stopping. But what's concerning to me is that, you kind of see regulations and the lack of regulatory clarity, or a lack of an organization to even try to succeed as far as whatever clarity there may be to work with regulators. And I mean, what happens whenever, look at Ripple as far as how they've been extremely transparent by all the quarterly presentations that they put out. There's factual evidence that they were trying to work with regulators, since the inception. And that's pretty much how responsible innovation is being treated in this country. And it's a little bit scary to me because all of these other nations, certainly even given the past week, we can start to think about the BRICS countries. If we think that they're not innovating, we're sadly mistaken. I mean, it's the proof is in the pudding, right? They are not stopping. I mean, China is pretty far along, even with the CBDC aspects, as far as that national lottery that they held months ago. And, they're not stopping. So when do we start, I guess, is what my question is. And I think that we're certainly building, but it's just, maybe it's a smoke and mirrors type thing, but it's frustrating because I think that clarity really is going to shake out the bad actors, or a lot of the bad actors in this space, which I think we need responsible regulation that does potentially protect people, but we need regulation that doesn't deal in laws that were, multiple decades ago, so that we can also innovate, because not a lot of people, understand where this space fully goes at its full inception. And we can't just completely eliminate the ability to innovate. Maybe it's within some sort of a sandbox, but we don't even have really that right now, in the United States.
Yeah, no, I agree. And also, I listened to Deaton say that, the SEC should just regulate ICOs and outright frauds. And I tend to agree with that. I think, all this red tape for legitimate projects is just, hindering the US and able to develop, like you were saying, and just going to lead to money offshores, to businesses offshores. Everything just moves away from the US. So this is a Bank of New York Mellon PDF. And it says over 2/3 of family offices actively investing in cryptocurrencies are very likely to increase holdings in the next 12 to 24 months. And this whole PDF had a lot of interesting little facts in it. So I'll add it in the link in the description below. But, it looks to me like the banks are doing, analytics, they're studying crypto. And what I've seen recently is it looks like there's more people that are willing to buy than to sell. And I think that's just growing over time. I mean, we could stare at the charts all day, but if we're consistently seeing more people willing to buy than to sell, that's a screams bullishness, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's more people starting to understand that there is this digital shift upon us based on all of the integrations going on across the board. And I mean, it's crazy because with all the stuff with Russia and Ukraine last week, I think I was watching the news on, I don't remember if it was Thursday or Friday, but, they're starting to talk about SWIFT, and kind of explaining at a very base level what SWIFT is and, the potential to cut Russia off from SWIFT and things like that. But I think more and more people, and that's just a natural progression of any technology that is here to stay, or any new asset class that is, I would still say in its nascency as far as being just young. You start to have people just understand more and a little bit more and a little bit more about what's going on. I don't know what mass adoption looks like or when we get there. I think that we're closer than we think, but I still think it's years away. And really that's going to tie into CBDCs. I mean, once CBDCs are live in major economies, I mean, you're going to see a complete paradigm shift as long as they don't regulate normal participants out of the market, which is scary to me too. You're going to start seeing more and more people understand exactly what we're dealing with here. And I think people are understanding that now. So it's interesting. Like the BNY Mellon, obviously a huge organization. And we were talking before this, KPMG and Deloitte. So two of the big four essentially putting out documentation, which I'll try to do a video on later. I think paying attention to these documents, they may seem dry or whatever, but man, I like looking at ones that came out a year or two ago because the numbers are just continuously changing about adoption, and they're only going up, and they're only going to go up. So,
do you remember the BNY Mellon heir was an investor in XRP that passed away? Do you remember that?
It sounds familiar. Was that was a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah. So there's and BNY Mellon's like one of the oldest banks too. So they're like very dry, stuffy type of bank. And they're saying that there's going to be more buyers and sellers. The heir was invested in XRP. So I found that pretty interesting too. I mean, he's like one of the old school banking heirs.
Yeah. Nomura, so Nomura is a tier one bank, and they just yesterday announced they're literally, so they had a new like entity that they were releasing out into the market, and I forget what it was called, but they're shifting it and they're rebranding it as far as digital assets and digitization. And they just announced that yesterday. They said on the board of or the governing board of Federa Hashgraph. So I mean, I think a lot of these institutions are playing as many sides of there's only one side to each fence, obviously, but so excuse this analogy, but playing as many sides of the fence as possible. Because they know that they have to adapt. They know they have to integrate. They're future-proofing and testing as much as they possibly can, because even the dude from R3 is saying they're going to measure as many times as they need to. And then when they cut, they're only going to cut once because it's going to be live. And it's interesting because there's not a ton of names involved as far as the digital asset space is concerned. I mean, there's probably 10, 10 names I can think of if I had to really sit down and think about it that are actually being developed or integrated with. And I mean, there's like 14,000 cryptos, right? Now you have like obviously layers within that because there's partnerships within those digital asset groups as well, but there's not a ton. So it's almost like we know the answer to the question years before the public answer comes out. And there'll probably be a few more answers to come out that we haven't even heard of yet in the next couple of years. But yeah, I mean, look at things like Casper, and look at things like even like Alliance Block for a layered solution. And all of the things that they're doing are very interesting to me because they are trying to kind of bridge the gap. And I think organizations and distributed ledger technology companies that are actually trying to bridge the gap and interoperate. I mean, Alliance Block is one of two fintechs that are directly associated with the London Stock Exchange, right? And they're not just, I'm sure they're not just associated for the hell of it.
Yeah, agreed. And then like LCX is the other one, right? That's
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, like what we see these large players, working with, setting up proof of concepts, doing all these initiatives to build something. They're not just doing that for the name, right? Like they're not doing that for hype and speculation. They're doing that because they want to actually build something. And that brings me to our next clip is, together with Energy Web Token, we've created the digital asset broker platform. By pairing our global Internet of Things network with blockchain tech, this allows connected objects and devices to transact seamlessly and securely. So, I mean, like, this is getting into like what the real future is going to look like, even beyond the short term. Look into the more longer term is when we have, things transacting with each other. Your self-driving car pays the parking meter and gets a charge while it's sitting there, and it's all autonomous where you're not even involved with it. And the things will have their own economy. So this is really creating wealth, right? It's like it's adding to everything versus taking away, versus taxing, versus doing everything like that. This innovation is building wealth. It's building new services, new ideas that are going to save money as well as build. And if we
it's always interesting to me, like a company like Vodafone, I mean, is just is massive, obviously, in telecoms. Their operating income in 2021 was like 5.1 billion euros. And you look at the market cap of something like Energy Web, and this is certainly not financial advice, but the whole market, and I know that people don't like using market cap as a measure. That's whatever. I'm just trying to make a point. The whole market cap of Energy Web is like 168 million bucks, right? So, I mean, Vodafone is huge. I mean, 43 billion in revenue. I think I read somewhere like, what did I tell you, Darren? Like 97,000 employees. And Internet of Things. I mean, when we talk about Internet of Things and artificial intelligence and biometrics and digital identity and things like that, and the DLT space, they all tie extremely closely into one another. I mean, when this all ends up shaking out, in my opinion. So I'm even thinking about like Hedera Hashgraph and Internet of Things. I've seen documents on that, updating smart grids. I mean, it is literally everything. If you look deep enough into this space, you start to realize that every other space outside of this space is either being affected or will be directly integrated with or potentially be consumed by this space. And it's huge.
Yeah, just a convergence, right? Like just the carbon emissions being tracked on blockchain, artificial intelligence managing them, unique data that's being processed and created wealth from that data. I mean, this takes away unique data being taken from these platforms and utilized in some type of manner. I mean, all these technologies come together at one point, and I think that's really where we're going to see the pickup in global growth in general, right? Just the benefits of all these technologies. Like there are benefits without the convergence of them, but I think that's like the real special sauce is when it gets to a point where all of them converge to innovate. And then like, what do those innovations look like? We can't even tell. We don't know even right now. We could just kind of theorize about what they can do, but it's going to get to a point where was something that we can't even explain today is going to happen. So
1,000%. There's the dude from MIT that had worked with Ripple in the past, but he worked with Ripple all the way back in like 2015 timeframe, I think. His name's Alex Pentland, and he put out a document called From Internet to Interledger probably 3 or 4 months ago. And what's interesting though is that there's such an opportunity in this space where it's not just going to be flushed out within the next couple of years. I mean, we're talking decades, where certain things, once they have the infrastructure built, and I certainly think that probably payments and settlements, the traditional financial system gets affected first, but then you start delving out into things like, how does like we said before, how does artificial intelligence play in? How does Internet of Things play in? And it's really, I think he presented a really interesting timeline. And this is from a dude that's, been hand in hand working with space. And the whole document is called From, right? So all the value mechanisms as far as transferring and capturing are just going to be flowing through the assets that have the most utility, the most liquidity, and the best use case within these different networks. And as time progresses, and we're talking, like I said, he laid it out, I think 20, 25 years out into the future, you just start to see a convergence of all these different markets being affected by this technology. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You were breaking up a little bit, but I think I caught
Okay, sorry.
What you're saying. Yeah, no. So just the application of everything being used too. That's really going to be where everything prospers. Here's the Pixel Moon video that you want to talk about.
Yeah, do we want to play it real quick?
Sure.
So to give a little bit of a background to this, yeah. There was an NFT launch like a week ago, and a lot of NFTs are obviously hidden until they're revealed. This one raised like 30 or 40 million bucks, and they had this video game trailer and all sorts of stuff. And then the expectation level was pretty high. The video game trailer that they had with the pixelated art and everything looks pretty slick. And then they do the release, and and the NFTs just look like that. And the funniest one was, so if you're familiar with NFTs, generally there's unique traits built into NFTs through layered functionality, et cetera, et cetera. And you go onto OpenSea or a platform like OpenSea, and I can click traits and I can see all the different traits. The one trait was just Kevin, which leads me to believe that like Kevin might be a developer that just, or an artist that just didn't ever flesh this out. Maybe he put his name in there as a placeholder. But yeah, the whole trade's named Kevin. But yeah, the expectation versus the reality sometimes in this space really makes you step back and think about, am I investing or am I gambling? What do I believe in long term? And I say investing or gambling, but I'm so hypocritical in saying that because I bought one of these before the before the reveal like a week ago, and I did not get Kevin. By the way, the Kevin ones, the last I looked was yesterday, and you probably don't know this, Darren, either. The Kevin ones are selling for like 7.5 Ethereum now. It's like $20 or $25,000 for the ones that say Kevin, and they just look god awful terrible.
What's did you get like a rare one, or is the one that you got?
That's Kevin. No, I looked. I didn't get anything special. I mean, I don't know what to consider special amongst this group of high class art. So
what's the floor price?
Yesterday it was like 0.4 Ethereum or something like that.
I mean, that's pretty high.
It's so bad that it's like, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, like if you had like an 8-year-old draw all this stuff, right, and just scanned it in and started selling a 0.4 Ethereum is what it's like. What's Ethereum at? Like $3,000 or something? 0.4 is like $1,200 for something that was just scribbled out. That's pretty.
Yeah. And I think even like with NFTs are certainly going to have a role to play in the future. And I think that art-based NFTs will as well. But if I look at all the NFTs across the board right now, and I've certainly went down the rabbit hole with them to an extent, I don't even know if it's necessarily about quote unquote rug pulls like we always talk about, but the lack of liquidity in a lot of these projects eventually will just negate somebody's ability to even sell one of these, with not, maybe it's not this project, but there's so many projects. What I'm trying to get at is I think that there's, just like in any market that gets hyped up, there's going to be oversaturation, right? There's going to be good projects, but there's going to be a lot of oversaturation, which, if we do have some sort of a shakeout and a capitulation moment within this space as a whole, it becomes real easy to see the projects that are actually building something versus the projects that are just going out there and trying to cash grab people, lie to people, scam people, and just make money. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no doubt about it that there's legitimate artists that will have a future in this world, right? Like just artists in general. If you buy fine art from somebody, you're kind of taking a risk that, that artist is never going to be known or anything. You just bought the artwork. So, but I mean, that artist could grow, become something massive at one point, and their art could be worth a ton of money at one point. So it's really, there's going to be famous artists. There's going to be legitimate NFTs and all that stuff. But it's kind of funny just watching, all the bad ones come to surface and the people that are, just looking for a cash grab. But I do.
The space, even the NFT space is crazy though, because like I had gotten into, there's a project called Phantom Galaxies, and I had gotten into their Discord like early. And they airdrop, and a couple of people within like the Patreon got into it early as well. And they airdropped like 2 NFTs, and one of it that's free. Granted, be careful. I don't recommend just going into Discords and doing stuff like that. But the NFT that they airdropped is like at one point it was like up to 2 Ethereum just for a free airdrop. I mean, it's nuts. So there's so much opportunity in this space. But again, due diligence and just trying to be careful. And this is, a lot of these markets have become the Wild West over the past year. It's almost impossible to say that you're not going to be involved into something that's going to fail unless you are super just sticking to the utility and the utility projects out there. But even then, it doesn't make sense to even buy those at all-time high whenever everything's super hyped. It makes sense to try to stage in, I think, and accumulate more of those based on gains that you have from other things. So.
Yeah, I mean, like I enjoy gambling. It's not like I don't enjoy it. I don't really see this as a bad thing as long as everyone knows what it is and not, not just jumping into everything, and they actually know that this is a gamble versus an investment. But I don't have a problem. I like gambling. It's fun, but depends on the person, right? Not everybody likes to gamble. Not everyone likes to see losses if it doesn't pan out, and people would rather stick to very legitimate type projects, which I understand that completely too. But there's always like this type of war versus utility maximalists versus people speculators, and in my mind, why can't I be both? Why can't I just do fun things, right? It doesn't have to be one or the other. There's a gray area in between there.
Well, and what's interesting for me more so is you look at like the OG projects that have been in this space, or what we would consider like the high utility assets, and then you look at the smaller projects that are releasing, and yeah, you're going to have scams with amongst those smaller projects, but you're also going to have good actors amongst those smaller projects, and it takes all of this occurring, in my opinion, for the innovation and true innovation to really flush out, because, and that's kind of why we're here, right? And why we try to dig into things, even dig into smaller projects. Like I am not a maximalist of anything, but I try to find things that interest me, things that I think potentially could be solving problems, and kind of seeing how the development gets pushed out. Like I even look with like in Hedera Hashgraph's ecosystem and look at like Hgraph Punks, right? And that team, essentially also operates Turtle Moon, and Turtle Moon has all sorts of tools that they're open sourcing for the Hedera community, which, I mean, that's innovation, and that's building, and those are real builders. That group of people are real builders in this space. So look at XRPL Punks as well, and on XRP and what they're trying to do from, I don't want to say vetted ecosystem, but just trying to innovate and trying to really grow, where it's, I think it takes both. And we've seen that, and it's easy to see the people that are actually building versus the people that are just trying to go out there and pander to people and grab cash. So.
Yeah, and that's true in the traditional world too, right? Like a famous artist or something that's building his network, that's building, going on TV shows or whatever he's doing, going to the right parties, all that stuff. That's kind of what's going on here too. So there's going to be people that build as technologically. They could build different things that you would want to use the NFT for. So somebody asked us to explain rippling, and so if you don't know what rippling is, on the XRP ledger, if I owe Solomon money and I also have a relationship with you, and you owe me money, I can get you to pay Solomon on my behalf. So that's what rippling is. It's just kind of like a credit system, right? Whatever my IOUs are out. If somebody owes me and I owe somebody else, I could just have that money float to their account from somebody else. And this is all optional. Like, you're not just automatically set up for this, but in the banking world, that would be a very useful tool, right? So in the traditional world, if you have a relationship with a bunch of different banks and rippling is enabled, it can auto balance all of your accounts. So that's very useful, I think.
Yeah, and they give really good examples, Darren, on xrpl.org as well. So in the XRP ledger, rippling describes a process of atomic net settlement between multiple connected parties who have trust lines for the same currency. It's an essential part of issued currencies because it allows users who trust the same issuer to send issued balances to each other with the issuer as a passive intermediary. In a sense, rippling is like a passive two-way currency exchange order with no limit and a one-to-one exchange rate for two currencies with the same currency code but different issuers. And they give examples within that as well. Maybe, Darren, we'll post kind of the longer explanation, I think, in the description of this video, because I think it's valuable for people to take a look at.
Yeah, well, also in this example, they're also saying, like, all right, I owe Solomon dollars. You guys owe me yen, right? They have pathfinding for that. So, it's like I said, with auto balancing, this happens with a conversion of different currencies. If you have multiple IOUs that are all set up with rippling, that one currency can convert to the other and kind of balance out the account. So, in banking, that would be a pretty big deal, right?
Yep.
Especially in like an autonomous manner too. I think those are expensive liquidity management tools that they call them, and that there's a lot of things that are expensive with that. So we covered Tranglo. Is there anything you want to add to Tranglo?
No, I think that for me, just seeing the access into all of the additional corridors is nice. Or if there already is access into those corridors, seeing additional liquidity within or with XRP flowing more so through those corridors will be really interesting. I don't want to delve too deep into the WeChat or the Alipay thing. I mean, I will say that I've seen other things in the past that align me with Alipay and potential Ripple. I think Standard Chartered is one of them. They have a access platform. Alipay is directly linked in with that, and then Standard Chartered provides Ripple as a service within that access platform. That's AXESS. Even going back into like Flutterwave, which is out of Africa, Flutterwave had Xcurrent built into its core functionality within their Rave protocol. Flutterwave obviously onboarding Alipay and things like that. So there's a potential for connection there, but that, again, it's not going to dictate the necessity to use something like RippleNet or best case scenario XRP. But those integration links are what's interesting, and that's what we consistently see, right? We consistently see the removing of silos via access points, and doesn't mean that those access points are going to be utilized, but it means that they exist. And for me, again, there's not a shit ton of assets out there that have potential access points. So it's not too difficult to try to, like I said, potentially pick winners. Again, not financial advice, but Just looking at the longevity of this ecosystem, if something can operate amongst tons of different rails and have the liquidity and the utility to do so, interesting that those options are maybe going to exist. So.
Yeah, and I mean, like all these integrations, you could argue that they would never use them, but why did they integrate to begin with? That's my questions for all the integrations. Like there has to be some reason that they were one of the first integrations to come across these platforms. So, maybe they don't use them, but at the same
one thing we also have to consider is that if and I know the integration points exist, but we always hear, well, XRP has access to this, so it's going to be used. But what about all the other institutions involved? Like, if it's going to pull value prospects away from whoever has those aspect points, then what would be the use case or the reason for using a digital asset? So I think it goes both ways, but I think that those access points do allude me to believe that, once the full system is built out from a digital aspect, just even dealing in assets that could potentially be utilized is, it's insane. It's really insane that this opportunity even exists. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And I mean, just what Todd McDonald was saying, right? Like, as central banks have what's their balance sheets like? It's trillions of dollars that he's talking about that might come onto public chains, right? So if we just look at the market cap of USDC or USDT, do you include that in the overall crypto market cap? Because I do. I mean, that there's a reason people are in stables, right? Like that money is easily accessible in the crypto world to these networks. You want to mint an NFT, you want to use a DeFi platform. That same concept's going to be there with, digital currency. So like you were saying earlier, it's going to swallow all these markets, wrapping securities, wrapping, titles, house titles, car titles. And I mean, the opportunity is insane. I agree with you.
Your health records, we saw that with the Federal Reserve. What we were looking at, was that like a week ago in the last podcast with NFTs and the Fed? They tied in NFTs, which I think you caught that and said, potentially digital identity and things like that. So.
Yeah, I mean, everything's going to be on some type of ledger, right? And then there's all the smart contracts, the autonomous nature of everything, that's where the efficiencies are going to really pick up. I mean, we see it just as replacing settlement in one aspect, but there's a whole other world that's going to be built on top of that to get rid of all the things that need to manage all these things. If you're able to automatically just do that, if it's able to just automatically figure everything out and just autonomously, you just leave that alone and it just works by itself. Yep. Brazil moves forward with crypto legislation, so I found the timing of this particularly interesting. So they're going to be moving forward with legislation. I think this whole thing is a huge catalyst to push all these regulations to fruition. You have the G7 nations, which, let me bring that next up. So the G7s are also working on crypto regulations. You're going to see a lot more KYC, AML talks, and this is going to be needed, right? They're going to need to regulate it in this manner. It might cause some disturbances in the traditional crypto world, but for mainstream adoption, all of these regulations are needed. So this is really, a foot up.
KYC AML is going to be mandated across the board, and anything really that we're dealing with. This is, again, my opinion. Once regulatory clarity, does flush out. I mean, I just think that it has to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. All these regulations are going to come to fruition, but the first one's going to be KYC AML, and this is really push to get that. And once they have all these on and off ramps strictly regulated, there's they know exactly what they have to do, then that gives a vote of confidence to the other regulators to come in to regulate, the IRS, everybody else. Turkey, crypto becomes ultra trendy as the lira falls. So, I mean, this is the Bitcoin thesis, right? Areas of
the hyperinflation. I didn't read this one yet.
Yeah, so the lira is just like tanked, and it looks like the citizens of Turkey are moving on to crypto, right? And I mean, I'm sure they're moving on to gold as well. So I don't buy that type of argument where people argue gold over Bitcoin. I think both are going to be used if you're in some type of country that suffers hyperinflation or any of this stuff. So, but it also looks like they're moving to dollars too. So they're using Tether and USDC. So found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, it said 50 up above in there. It said it lost 50% of its value.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts on the Bitcoin versus gold argument?
I mean, I think that gold is always going to have a place, and this is just me. I'm a big, more so silver than I'm a big silver guy. But as far as just transmittability and like the ability to actually use something, and I mean, I don't think gold goes anywhere. I don't know if I look at Bitcoin as digital gold. I don't know. But I just think the ability to custody and to transmit on a peer-to-peer basis without an intermediary regardless is extremely valuable. Bitcoin still can do that. But I look at other assets doing that more efficiently. But I know that the rhetoric still exists, digital gold. I don't know. I don't know how much I buy. I mean, it's great to say, but look, we're talking about something that's been around for, almost 13 years. And gold's been around forever, right? So I'm not going to make the assumption, given the short history, even though the rhetoric exists out there, that it's digital gold. That's my opinion again. And I don't think Bitcoin goes anywhere though. I think that they find out a way to potentially, I could be wrong with this too, but I think all the sustainability initiatives, there was that thing that came out of, what was it, the European Union potentially, was it the EU or the European Central Bank with proof of work? They had
IMF had a PDF that dug deep into proof of work, proof of stake, Byzantine fault tolerance. Is that what you're talking about?
There was something about trying to regulate it out. Oh. And this was over the past couple of days, but they dropped it from the docket. So I don't think that it's going to be brought up, at least not now.
Yeah, I don't know that, but I think like blockchain adoption can make Bitcoin ESG friendly, right? Like Kevin O'Leary's Virgin Coin type of scenario. I think that's very possible. In my opinion, though, like the whole thing, if like I was about to suffer hyperinflation tomorrow, how would I have myself set up? I would have my savings in gold and silver, and I would have my spending money in crypto, right? That's how I would set myself up. Maybe I would see a bigger gain through crypto because it's a tinier market cap. But the way I look at gold and silver is, just set it and forget it. Don't even think about it. But I mean, that doesn't mean that it's not, very useful in times like these.
Yeah, and look, I think the rhetoric is going to be the rhetoric as far as some, the digital gold, whatever's being presented as digital gold as far as Bitcoin's concerned. But I think it's going to be the rhetoric until the rhetoric has to shift. And why would the rhetoric shift? And there's all these green initiatives that are certainly being pushed out from the largest powerhouses in the world right now. And we kind of are alluded to that time frame of 2030 with the carbon neutral or carbon negative aspects within all of these legacy systems. And, there's going to be digital asset utilization within those same systems. And for me, it's which assets fall within the purview of that sustainability model. And I just don't think that things like, I don't think that the proof of work assets are going to be able to keep up or meet the standards that eventually do come out of kind of the green initiatives that we're seeing across the board. And if they do, I'm curious as to how. I mean, I think like you had alluded to, there are probably ways to sustainably mine Bitcoin. Maybe it is, via, the buyback of carbon credits or whatever it may be, but the mining footprint of Bitcoin from electricity consumption and just it's absolutely insane. I mean, even one, this was 2 or 3 years ago, one transaction could power a US household for like 13 days or whatever that fact that came out was. I mean, and that's if I send you a fraction of a Bitcoin. I mean, it's insanity in my opinion. And I don't think that it's sustainable, but we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't, I'm not invested in Bitcoin. I don't think that it's, I think it's wasteful. I think it's inefficient, all those things, but there might be a way, and not, we'll see how.
Bitcoin went down to like, and I'm not saying it's going to, but let's say it went down to like 13 or 14 grand. Would you try to accumulate one Bitcoin?
At 13, no. If it went down further, I might like 5 grand. I'd definitely try to get one.
Yeah.
But then again, the charts are like ruined. If it goes to 5 grand, 13 grand, it's still looking pretty good. But at 5 grand, it's kind of like, the whole bullish momentum, unless it was like a deflationary shock, right? Like if it was just a wick that went down to 5 grand, then I'd be interested. Actually, just
14 grand would even be catastrophic for the market. But I mean, I've seen a lot of different people talk about a lot of different worst case scenarios, and that 14 grand level is kind of what consistently comes out. But at that point in time, you have to think, I don't know. I mean, it's really interesting right now just because of all of the adoption that we are seeing. But I still do think that going by history and things like that is important. So you kind of have to weigh it out both ways as far as what the market cycles look like. A lot of people talk about that super cycle, which, potentially we'll know after something happens, right? If whichever way it goes, we'll know how it panned out. But it's almost impossible to predict the future.
I do think that we're set up for mass inflation right now. This morning, Powell talked about like how they're going to stick to their guns, but then he said they're going to raise the interest rates to 0.25%. Right now, like there's a lot of demand for dollars because of energy, right? But what if this escalates and they cut that line off? That demand goes elsewhere, and the demand for the dollars goes elsewhere. And then you're going to see energy prices spike, CPI spike, as well as dollar fall, as well as the dollar falling. So, I mean, we're set up to, it could go either way, but yeah, I don't, it's looking bad in my opinion. Like it is looking bad from, an economic standpoint. And then like, where does the Fed go if this is deflationary? Like they're backed into a corner. Like they'll have to go deep negative, and they'll need CBDCs to do that. They'll need all this stuff to do that. I'm kind of worried, to tell you the truth. I'm
I don't think anybody has a warm and fuzzy right now about anything that's going on from financial aspects of the world. But yeah, Anchorage co-founder institutions are becoming more sophisticated about crypto. This is obviously not surprising. It is very interesting looking 2 or 3 years ago, what was being presented or what we could find as far as, how deeply these institutions were digging into this space. And you hear words like coming out of the Bank for International Settlements, the IMF, and all these different institutions that, extremely risky, crypto is this, crypto is that. That's 3 years ago. And then obviously they've been building the entire time, so that the rhetoric starts to slowly shift about what would look sustainable from a CBDC standpoint. And then all the proof of concepts occurring as well. So it's not surprising to me that we see news come out like this. The one thing I wanted to say earlier is, with all the crazy stuff that I know that you and I've found over the past few years, think about all the stuff that we hadn't found, or everything that's actually going on that we're not privy to, and that there's no way to actually find it. And there's a lot, I'm sure. Yeah.
And the things that like we're finding all the leaks, right? But that means that there's a pipeline going somewhere that's actually leaking all this stuff. And we don't even know what's in the pipeline. We just know the leaks. And it looks like this is specific, that this also mentions custodying NFTs. So that's pretty interesting too. That there's,
yeah, I mean, I did that interview with Christian Hasker from Hedera. Was it 2020? In like June or July of 2020. And well, he had said that he had never seen this, but even like the Department of Defense for updating smart grids and utilizing Hedera Hashgraph, and like the Secretary of the Navy and all that stuff, that there was testing going on like back then. And that was like, we're almost coming up on, 2 years since that. So just really interesting to see everything that's being built out.
I didn't know that. That's pretty interesting. The whole smart grid updates, that's needed too. Just the automation of smart grids and making sure that they never go down, right, and they are able to be utilized in an efficient manner. So that's a really good use case for blockchain and AI and everything that's associated. Like we were saying, the convergence of technology. That's an example of that. Just think of all like the waste that happens with overproduction of energy, if that's able to efficiently be managed with blockchain and AI, right? That's huge.
No, I agree.
So the last clip is FIS World Pay joins Shift Crypto Compliance Network. It's about how we bridge the crypto world and the traditional world. So this is kind of like, everything that we've been saying. FIS is pretty massive. If you don't know FIS is, just Google them, but they're one of like the biggest payments platforms. And then Shift, I guess, is the KYC AML. So Fidelity
Information Services, they're RippleNet as well, I believe, or at least they have Ripple integration. I think WorldPay too, right? Wasn't World, because you have like the WorldPay, Earthport, Visa, all the different connections within that. I'm pretty sure WorldPay is RippleNet, isn't it?
Yeah, there was documents that showed RippleNet integrations. I never specifically found anything XRP, but I know there was a lot of RippleNet integration. So also the whole the crypto liquidity hub thing that Ripple has created was pretty interesting, with all of these payment services now offering crypto payments, and now Ripple positioned themselves for a liquidity provider for crypto as well. So we could potentially, I'm
gonna have to look into Shift more for sure. Shift is only like I'm assuming did it say Shift Network on there, Darren? I'm on.
It's SHYFT, and
it has like a $45 million market cap, and it's one of those assets. Like if I look at Songbird, I see similar things where the price. There's a launch essentially, and for Shift it was March of 2021, and then you just see price action just completely shit the bed, which doesn't mean that something is a complete shit project. It's about timing,
So Shift is a crypto, like a public crypto that we can invest in?
That's what I'm looking right now. Scroll back up to the top. Digital identity system, it said, yeah.
Yeah. It says non-crypto firm to join. Oh, wait. Let's see. So is this one? Is this the same?
I'm pretty sure it's the same.
Huh. I didn't realize that. And it's only a $50 million market cap.
Yeah, I'm going to probably take a dive through it today a little bit. I mean, they've got partners.
It's 2 point.
First IQ, Chainlink, Kylan, Parsec, Algorand, Casper, Harmony, Oasis, Polygon, Polymath.
Huh. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that. So it's a good thing I brought that up, because I thought it was like a non-crypto company that's just setting up for that. But
you go on there. Oh yeah, no, it's them, because I clicked on the Twitter link at the bottom of the website. Yeah, and it's Fidelity Information Services and WorldPay joining Shift's crypto compliance network.
Cool. And they're also going to make
DLA Piper partnered with them. DLA Piper is also Hedera Hashgraph. DLA Piper is like one of the biggest law firms in the world. The second large, that's right below in the article, the second large non-crypto firm to join Fifth following the law firm DLA Piper last month. I'm definitely going to be looking into Shift a little bit more.
And it looks like they're trying to regulate, be the identity system in DeFi spaces. So, I mean, I think DeFi does have a future, just going to be, heavily regulated to a point where, it's not anonymous, it's transparent. So, that's a pretty good use case. And financial institutions, government service providers, it's all the KYC stuff. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to be diving a little bit deeper into this one, I think, today.
They have a Shift DAO too. Wonder what the APY is for it. Well, yeah, well, I'll look into this. So I hope everyone enjoyed the show. Please let us know what you think in the comments below.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the time. As always, it's a pleasure, Darren. I think this was a pretty good video. I mean, a lot's went on over the past week, and I think the biggest thing is just to pay attention to this space, pay attention to who's integrating, pay attention to who's building out all of these rails, and what platforms may or may not be involved within those aspects. So, yeah, I think it was a good one, Darren.
Yeah, I think we had a more natural feel going back and forth. You know, it seemed I forgot that I was even recording. I was just like kind of talking to you. So I think that's a nice way to do these. It's just have that natural.
We've been bullshitting back and forth for about 3 years now, 3.5 years. So I think that we should be able to hold a conversation together.
Yeah, I don't know. Whenever I think that I'm being recorded, I just like get this wave of anxiety, but I didn't get much sleep last night. So I think like I'm too tired to care about anxiety today. So
yeah, just roll with the punches, man. Well, as always, it's been a pleasure, dude. So
yeah,
thank you everybody for watching.
Thanks everyone. Have a good one.